the main thing is I'm not going to be able to write to give a kind of wrap-up conclusion. It's just too many issues and too complicated. And in a certain sense, I think of the last lecture, the one before this current one. That's the conclusion. We saw how the chase ended. We saw how it turned out that there was no right answer to which way Moby Dick is, that Moby Dick behaves in all of the various ways that people have seen him from various perspectives. And finally, Ahab gets no answer as to what the universe has in mind for him and what his mission and purpose is. And he doesn't even know that he doesn't know, because he just gets killed in this random way. And so that was sort of summarize that already last time. And last time also, I talked about how Ishmael got saved by a coffin on which was carved the saving practices of a culture. And and also on Ishmael's body is presumably written out the saving practices, so to speak, of his way of life. He's sort of a culture of his own, with a way of life is his own kind of special polytheistic way of life. I'll say more about that in a little while. But and when I keep saying carved on his body, of course I don't mean that really with knives, and I don't even mean written on it, tattooed. I mean really that these practices are in his body. He grew up and he was socialized into them, and everybody has practices like that in their body. Then if they didn't, they couldn't behave in a way that was intelligible to themselves and everybody else. And when they do have that, they can behave that way. That doesn't save them from the problem of the meaninglessness, the seeming meaninglessness of everything. You've got to have more details to talk about that. So anyway, that I think is sort of so as far as I can see, we concluded what's the basic story and the basic position of the book. But there's plenty to go over. It's just that it's something so strange that it's hard to know how to sum it up to give an answer to it, but I'll do my best. So I'm going to take up with the philosophical problem I got us into at the end last time, which was I made it seem as if when anybody is open to a world, they're open to a perspective, and that the perspectives that people are open to are incompatible with each other. And there seemed to be something wrong with that. People were objecting, how can the world have these incompatible features? And that's when I was trying to talk about what I call the rich reality, in which the reality is such that you could have an indefinitely large number of perspectives on it, and they needn't all add up unless they are just different possible perspectives, and the world is capable of different possible perspectives, even incompatible perspectives. I'll give it a simple example in a minute. And the reason that this seems impossible is we, in our culture, have been trained to think, we're sort of addicted to think, that there is some fundamental single reality, and if those are all perspectives on that, then they can't contradict each other, because you can't have the contradictory perspectives on this one basic reality. But of course, the point is, Melville's got a kind of interesting philosophical view in which he's not accepting that there's one basic reality. All there are is perspectives. That's what Pip understands when he says, I look, we look, they look, and so forth. And then I think it makes sense to think that there could be contradictory perspectives. Not that any one person could hold them, but that maybe one person at different times could hold contradictory perspectives. I don't see why not. And again, but then I think you're not supposed to be able to ask about which was the right one. So let me give you the example that I gave once already, because it's how this seemed sort of how I came to believe the rich reality story was, and I realize I'm repeating myself, but it's the only example that I really think is simple and clear. So you've got these moods, and moods are giving you perspectives on reality. And so you could be in a very down mood, melancholy, drizzly November of your soul, the way Ishmael is at the beginning. And in that mood, what is salient, what shows up for you, are scary, depressing things. He gets into funeral processions, he looks into coffin warehouses, and he finds everybody else so annoying that he wants to walk up and knock their hats off. That's a perspective, all right. And some other person in the same town, on the same street in Nantucket or where, could be having a tremendously upbeat mood. Everything was full of opportunities, and they felt that they could deal with these opportunities, and they felt close to the people they were seeing, and their death didn't even enter their mind at that point. Now, so they've got an entirely different and incompatible perspective. Only the two theys I'm talking about are two different people. The problem I got us into last time was that one person at one time could be seeing two incompatible colors, or hearing two incompatible voices to talk like the whale temple, or seeing two different pictures on the doubloon. That's what I think is what got me into trouble, and that certainly is wrong. But I think the simple mood example is supposed to get you to see that it's possible that reality could have incompatible aspects, in the sense that one person can be attuned to and pick up some aspect of the situation, and another person could be attuned to and pick up a contradictory perspective or aspect of the situation. I was trying to give you a grumpy, melancholy aspect story, and at the same time, you could have in the same town, at the same time, on the same street, somebody in an upbeat mood having an entirely different perspective on reality. And that's fine. The only reason it seems like you can't have such a story is if you believe that there must be one right answer to what it means, or whether this is a gloomy town or a upbeat town, or a gloomy time or an upbeat time. That's philosophy. That's what Ishmael is against. He's against the idea that you could have any complete truth. So science can't give you the complete truth about reality. Religion can't give you the truth about reality. Your own moods can't give you the truth about reality. There isn't any such thing. And then I think the Moby Dick Melville view will get along all right. Is it still a problem? No. I had a feeling it was too easy. Go ahead.
You're saying that people hold that they would pick out an aspect of
Mm-hmm. 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 Oh, I see. If we thought of them as private. Mm-hmm.
I know it means the same on the whole PPI aspects of reality. I live in the account, so it's a flip effect. So we're not pure studies and move it all down.
That's a good objection. I'm not convinced yet that it's devastating. It's challenging, to say the least. But it looks to me like, stick with the party. And of course, it's easy if you think of moods as subjective, as Tyler says. Then one person is having a downer situation, a private downer mood, and another person is having a upbeat, manic mood, and then they're just projecting these two moods on some neutral situation. That's how it would look if in the traditional way of thinking about it. But if you're going to say most moods are public, when we way back to Homer, if you can remember back there, I mean, the only moods that Homer's interested in are big deal public moods, like Ares is shining and everybody's in this battle, or Paris is there and at least one other person, Helen, is in the same mood and is running off with him. And then you have a problem. If you have this shared, if moods can be, and most importantly are, shared, then it looks like the party had better be a happy party or a gloomy party. I don't know what to say about that. I feel that I'm being driven to say it, but I don't trust the phenomenon that if you're gloomy enough, the happiest party you can open a gloomy aspect on it, and if you're happy enough, the gloomiest party, you can open an upbeat aspect of it. That's what I have to say, and I don't feel comfortable saying it. Go ahead.
Makes sense. So in any given party was potentially happy or potentially.
Yeah, the whole of all of reality is potentially everything and could go every way.
That's how I can think of zoning is to think of them as potentialities, which are visually.
Okay.
Potentialities are real life. We can say of the moment, it could be gloomy or it could be happy.
Well, that's right. If you hereby is that this is the objective sort of grounded way, there isn't any answer to that. But you don't have to go from there, do you, to this extreme. The potentiality seems a cop out to the traditional way of looking at things. All you have to say is there are all sorts of ways that people can be in moods that take the current situation. And if you want to say, well, then those moods must have been able to pick out a potentiality of the current situation, I don't know if that adds anything. Yeah.
As we're going in, this party is potentially gloomy or potentially happy. Right? And if there are two potentialities which can't both be true, yet they could be true prior to entering the situation.
I just don't see what that does. All you have a right to say is that you're feeling gloomy, and if you were sort of saying things honestly, you would have to say, I'm feeling gloomy, and I know that this party is gloomy, and it's going to look gloomy to me. But why sort of stand outside in a kind of neutral position and say this party is potentially either a great one or a downer? You don't have any sort of justification for doing it.
Standing at the neutral position, thinking there's a party, you're going in gloomy, not going in down. As we're going in, the question is, what's the shared mood going to be? Is it going to come around the year?
I'm going to have a shared gloomy mood, and you're going to have a shared happy mood. That is, what's going to be salient to you is everything upbeat that you can see and feel in the room, and what's going to be salient to me is everything downbeat that you can see in the room. That's how it would have to be. Yes, and many more. Because there's just various ways that you can get attuned to there are enough, this is the shared reality, there are enough aspects to a room that you can manage to, you can say, well, it's going to be a great party because I'm going to meet the one person that I'm going to love and be happy with. But it's a shared party. Anybody could meet this person, and I could meet other people. But it's going to be like that. There's who knows what other possibilities. Erica wants to say something? No, somebody over here wants to say something. Where? Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry if this is taking multiple steps back, but what is the public mood or the shared mood that we're talking about? Because my understanding is moods are.
Well, okay, good. I'm glad you say so. I mean, good.
Particular mood in that to call a party gloomy.
Yeah.
We have such a limited understanding of other minds that are.
Okay.
a party is gloomy. That's just our.
Okay, well, listen to him because he represents, he's Descartes. He represents and that's the Enlightenment and the dominant view, and very important to hear it and to realize that most of us really believe it. I mean, I'm straining with all my might to try to think and act and as if I don't believe it. But Descartes, I mean, so starting with Homer, the emphasis was all on the shared moods. They were the gods that were shining, and one or another god was the one shining, and different people could pick out sometimes different gods that were equally shining on the situation. But it was all public. Remember, there was no inner in Homer. I talked about that. Homer says that Odysseus had a trick that he could cry inwardly, but it was some really weirdo thing Odysseus could do, and nobody else could do it. You know, Odysseus was extremely clever. And then remember I said in the time of Augustine, St. Jerome could read the Bible to himself, and people came from far around just to watch this amazing thing. The meaning went into his head, and his tongue didn't move. Those kinds of experiences certainly happen. And then Descartes comes along and pulls this amazing switch on the whole culture. The most, as I say in this course, and I believe, the biggest change of world since Jesus. I mean, that is a really reconfiguring switch in which what was sort of the leftover kind of garbage that was in people's heads, private itches and feelings, and there were and odd moods that they get from I don't know, something they shouldn't have eaten or something, and there are such things, but Descartes manages to take this marginal stuff and make a case that this shows that everything really, all your moods are really in your mind, because all your experience is in your mind. Where else could your experience be? Okay, if you're interested in this problem, you have to go on and take more philosophy courses, because the courses are going to be either in what's called modern, an early modern, and that's Descartes and followers, and that's the belief that after all, everything, all these experiences that we're having right now are in each of our minds, and they're private. And people didn't believe that before, and now there's a whole other movement to try to break out of this Cartesian view and rediscover the phenomenon of shared moods. That's why I talk about parties. I could talk about baseball games when everybody jumps up and cheers at some brilliant play that's been made, or concerts when everybody's sort of swaying around together to the music. It looks like there are both private-ish experiences and shared public ones. And then the pre-modern philosophers and now the post-modern philosophers are looking at the social moods, because they do look like they're the important ones. The other ones are sort of fleeting, and they don't make much difference to anybody but you. Whereas the mood at a, say, Martin Luther King rally, that's a big deal. That's a public mood, and it could change the way people are treated. It can change what kind of president we can have, and so forth. Okay, what else can I say about it? I'm trying to, what you have to do is work out in detail how Descartes got us into this way of thinking about things, and take it apart and reconstruct the way it was thought, or the way people experienced it before Descartes. I can't say more. I mean, important philosopher, I mean, if anybody is listening out there in the podcast world or in here either, if you care about this, you should take a course in Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein devoted his life after a certain point, and all of his mental powers, which were terrific, to trying to deconstruct this Descartes picture. And then there was a philosopher in England, Ryle, who said that he had to get rid of the ghost in the machine. That was his idea, that the Cartesian idea that there's a thinking thing inside. So there have been philosophers who sort of threw their lives on the line to get out of this Cartesian view. Go ahead, but I mean, I can't expect you to be talked out of it without lots of struggle. Go ahead.
In the homework, didn't the characters have some control over how receptive they would be? Right?
Um, yes and no. I mean, it's fun to read. This is kind of like a review. I would say, yes, people had control. And who were those people? The suitors. The interesting thing is that the suitors are not receptive to the gods and don't feel that they are sort of, they have to be open and show gratitude and accept the moods that, like Aphrodite or Ares, opens up for the crowd. So people have free will in that sense, that they can control to some extent anyway what they're feeling and so forth. It's just that from Homer's point of view, those are bad people. They're going to come to a bad end. They are not appreciative, so to speak, of what the human beings are capable of, namely being open to the gods and thereby getting very strong, meaningful moods. So you want to say something? Go ahead. Yeah, you could. In fact, that's what you would say. You guys could get together if you have this kind of Cartesian picture. If moods can only be in people's minds, I mean, the whole concept of something being in your mind is so interesting. I mean, you can get yourself convinced that right now you're having an experience in your mind of me up here talking. And it sort of helps you to believe this, to think, well, what else is going on in the brain? And the brain is in the head, and the mind must be in there too some way. And then all of a sudden you could try to convince yourself the following, no, you're here in a room. And you have this amazing human capacity of being open to what's going on in the room. And right now you're open to me talking, and I'm up here talking. I'm not in everyone's head, and you all happen to share this picture of me in your minds. But that's what you get. He's right. If you're a Cartesian, and there are still, I don't know, are there still Cartesians? I suppose there are. I mean, Husserl's the last one I know. What's that? I see. They're underground Cartesians. In fact, maybe Searle is an underground Cartesian. Uh, yes. So you could get a deep. I mean, Descartes is deep. You don't get to be a super reconfigurer if you're not a brilliant, deep philosopher. So you can't just dismiss somebody by calling them Cartesians. So that's what somebody like Ryle would do. But you're right. But we can't do that here. This isn't a course in history of modern, but you're luring me into this. Yes.
That might help though if we don't hear it in a perfect way. So take the party example. If you walk into a party and you have different groups of people in different shared livings, right? So in one corner you have Brazilian people who are kind of staying to themselves, and most of the party is happy. It would be right to say that at the party it's both gloomy, because there are a group of people who share a interest, and it's happy because there are another.
Yeah, and presumably, let me just add something, and they don't see each other, because what's salient to the gloomy people is only the other gloomy people, and what's salient to the happy people, or maybe they do see each other, but only as annoying or something like that.
Linguistic unit, so it's saying the same party is both happy, and because there are two sub-worlds within that world. But what we really want to say is there's two parties going on. There's the happy part in the corner, the gloomy part in that corner.
I mean, what I want to say is there are people in one corner who are responsive to all of the downer things, and that's what's salient for them. And there are people in another corner who are responsible for all the upbeat things, and that's what's salient to them. And that's, both of them see it as total. They don't see that it's divided into corners in which the corners are as bad as in their mind. There is one big shared thing in the party, only different people see this big shared thing under a different perspective. Yeah, go ahead.
Whatever you want to say about the ontology of moods and all the rest of it, Tyler initially seemed to object even to the possibility of your first example, which was simply that two people in the same place can be in different moods and therefore see the street in different ways. Now, that just seems to be possible. Two people can be in different moods and walk down the street and see different things in it. We've all done this when we have met a friend in the opposite mood walking down the street. And, we have a conversation about, how horrible the street is or how pretty it, so the bare possibility of that doesn't seem really doubtful. And so I'm a little unsure why we got into this place.
I think because that account thinks of moods as a crime. So I think
It's not an account. It's simply a description of something which really does seem possible.
so. If I'm
Because it's happened, right? To all of us.
Just I don't understand. Bert wants to say in that situation, people walking down the street with two different moods, doing different aspects of the shared situation. I don't see how we can say that. I want to say one of them is inability to project that.
Go ahead.
I can have that make sense. That is two people projecting different moods on something. I don't know what you mean.
I don't know what it means to say that projecting a mood. There's some little mood in here which they project out onto the world, sort of a dark kind of goo that comes out of their minds and spreads over everything. It's harder to understand projection than it is to understand attunement. That's why I changed sides when I read Heidegger.
I mean, you're being asked us to accept, reject something that depends with not happening. You're saying in these situations, it can be A and not.
I don't think I'm saying that. I'm saying that there are people who can attune themselves to the gloominess of the party, and there are people who can tune themselves to the attractiveness of that same party, and that's rich reality. There's enough for both of them, and there's no contradiction.
I don't think an entailment of this view is that the party is both gloomy and
Well, there's the is in there. Yes, if you start that, then you're in trouble. Or at least from this point of view, you're in trouble. You shouldn't be thinking then the party is this or that. That's what philosophy since Plato has conned us into. You should just say, what do you say? You don't want to say I'm experiencing a downer party. But you don't want to say it is in the sense of sort of objectively, no matter what everybody feels about it, this is how it is. What do you want to say? The party is, in Heidegger jargon, showing up for me as gloomy. Something like that, I think is the right thing to say. If you say is, you're in trouble, I think. And, okay, somebody over here. I mean, this is turning into an introduction to the history of modern. I don't know what to do. Go ahead, but it's important.
Because it seems like if you can have some experience before you go into some other, like say, okay, you're at your house and you have some bad experience, then you go out onto the street, and that bad experience has put you into a bad mood, whereas on the street there might be things that you would see as good normally, but you're not seeing as good now because of the bad experience you just previously had. Wouldn't that be a way to reconcile the fact that there would be somebody might be in a bad mood and then projecting that mood that they had just gotten from a previous experience onto the current situation?
Well, yeah, but I would, of course, turn it around and say that when the previous experience has made them sensitive to the annoying aspects of the situation. There are always annoying aspects in every situation because reality is very rich. And so the projecting doesn't mean anything. I mean, okay, then they're attuned. Yeah, they're going to be attuned to the grumpy side of things. Okay, and that's right. Well,
that seems to reconcile the fact that there could be two moods is in a party. Somebody previously was in another situation that attuned them to a grumpy mood, and they went into the party and they're seeing all the grumpy things in the party. And then you have some other people who were just in another happy mood before they come into the party.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's what I think happens. I mean, the people get to be attuned or sensitive to these aspects. I mean, remember, we're doing all this just to try to understand Melville, but we got to be careful because what we're trying to understand is what Pip sees with the doubloon, for instance. I just don't want it to totally disappear into the history of the Cartesian philosophy. I mean, what Pip thinks is that everybody who thinks that there is one way reality is and that they're seeing it has missed the fact that the reality is perspectival through and through, and that people see it from different perspectives. Remember, we don't want to say, it's very tricky, but there's another bad guy, for this argument at least, waiting in the wings. Well, reality is just chaos, and people project, again, all these interpretations on it. The doubloon ought to block that, because the doubloon isn't chaos. It's got all kinds of complicated features, and that's what each one of them sees an entirely different doubloon on the basis of their openness, which is colored, so to speak, or sensitized by what, as he might say, where they've been and what they've just gone through and so forth. But it doesn't, if you think about the doubloon story and take it as it's given to you by Melville, then you see that there is plenty to see in the doubloon when you hear that whole picture. And it really is there. But that doesn't mean that the doubloon really is, period is, I mean, in that strong sense, a story about three peaks and a story about Ahab. That's just one of the ways you can get sensitized and so forth. I think I'm going around in loops now, or at least repetitions, so I'm going to go on. I've done the first sentence. And remember, I'm trying to help you get a grip on this very complicated book. In a second, all I want to say this rich reality story is told, I just want to remind you again and again, it's got the rainbow story, in which people are tuned to various colors, but only one at a time. And if you try to add them all up and say, well, what's the real color? You get blankness. So there's the rainbow story, there's the doubloon story, which I was just telling. Don't forget this wonderful story about the whale skeleton temple, where it's all a lot of different voices. And if you're too close, you can't make out anything, but if you get the right distance, one voice will be sort of resonate, and pick it out. That's exactly that same story again. There are all these voices saying all these different things, but you can't hear them except by getting attuned to one of them, some wavelengths where one of them is. Now, a hand. Yeah, go ahead.
We're telling the story where there is something really there. There's some real reality that's just too complex to be.
Yes.
These different views are just ways of picking up on different aspects of one real reality.
Uh-oh.
That these different meanings are just ways of seeing.
It's tricky. Yes, that's right. We don't want to say that it's a way of, then we get to a kind of projection talk. There's just an X there, a chaos there, and we're projecting different sounds on it or colors on it. Now, we don't want to say that. We want to say that there's a kind of indeterminate richness. It's not as if, and that's what worried me about this potential story. It's not as if there's a sort of list of all the ways that this can be picked up. The reality is indefinitely open to being attuned to in various ways, but you can't attune to it in any old way. You can't expect to hear the voices singing Mozart opera when you get up to the Greek temple on some obscure island, or Greek, I mean, whale temple, so forth. So it's, again, you've got to just try to think it with not the usual philosophical categories. Minds, projection, constant reality. Reality is what is constantly the case, and then different people see different aspects, but it's just a different and hard to get used to story, that reality is indefinitely rich, and we are capable of being open in an indefinite amount of ways. That's the best I can do. Okay, I'm going, okay. Why not? Where are we? Okay.
There's a conflict in Melville between projection and attunement.
Oh,
are you the one who's projecting your mood onto the world and therefore you see it a certain way? Or are you
Good. I probably,
people, why isn't projection making the world attuned to you? Whereas attunement is just letting the world
well,
seems to want to you seem to resist choosing one overarching ideology or philosophy that everything has to follow. You seem to want to find that in everything there's just a balance of these two.
uh,
Shouldn't be the extreme, but in the balance.
it's interesting what you're saying. I just don't think we have to go look at the text. It just seems to me he doesn't ever say anything like that. Of course, he doesn't say,
The shore where you talk about Bolkington, and then it's like the mind is like a ship fighting against the waves from being driven off of the coast, and so it makes it seem to be like the mind and the world are both like in conflict with each other, and both are capable of doing the same thing to each other, but they're just
well, maybe. I mean, I'll take another view, but since neither one of us, I think, have a text right off the go, I think, and what I thought you were going to point out, and you sort of did without stressing it, I was misspeaking because I was making it sound too much like that you, somehow something like give a meaning if you're looking at the doubloon. And I want to say, no, that you're supposed to think about it as the doubloon draws you into it and draws you to see certain saliences. When Ahab looks at the triple peaks, he sees power. And when Starbuck looks at them, he sees the Trinity. But that's because, given the way his life, Starbuck, has been Christian, the coin just draws his attention to the triples, and it will draw his attention to all sorts of triples. And somebody else, given the way he's been raised as maybe a student of volcanoes, will get interested in the three volcanoes will grab his attention too. And I think we're supposed to think that it's all very much a philosophy of receptivity, that it's either the coin itself, or if it's a question of, it could be a question of what's shining on the coin. If Aphrodite is shining on the coin, any sort of erotic elements in it will light up and grab you, and so forth. But I mean, my sort of assumption is, and it is an assumption, but you've got to check it out. Homer is totally into this receptivity, responsiveness story. And it's just that we have a lot of trouble seeing it and believing it because a long tradition has washed it out. Descartes did it in. But what? I'm trying to think, but the responsive, on all levels, there's this kind of responsiveness. You've heard me say, the Greeks seems to say when they sit down to eat, that their arms went out to the food ready before them. It isn't as if they sort of actively reached for the food. And it isn't as if either they just had a kind of spontaneous, kind of mechanical thing, like when you hit somebody on the knee, their leg goes up so that when they're hungry and they sit down, their arm goes out. It's some middle thing, but it's a middle thing that is basically on the side of the attraction. And when their arms go out to the food in front of them, they're drawn into eating. But look and see. But it's nice to think, I mean, why I'm so interested in this. I mean, it's interesting to think what a world would be like, a Homeric world would be like, in which all sorts of wonderful, mysterious, frightening stuff was coming at you from all over, calling you to deal with it. And that's how it was at that point. That's what Heidegger says, my guy, that's why the world was full of wonder and it was overwhelming. Now you have to add a funny thing. And therefore these people did philosophy in order to sort of calm it down and get it under control. I can't remember the phrase. No, I can't, but anyway, that's a picture. That's the Homer picture, I think. And I think it's important to try to stress it because it's been covered up by 2,000 years of people saying Homer just didn't understand the role of free will, the role of the mind, the power of the inner, and so forth. I think Homer was very good at understanding something else. Go ahead.
A lot of people now aren't receptive, right? A lot of us are sort of actively setting up the goal and the goal, right? There seem to be figures in Delaval's book like doing that. Trying to marry them as a sort of receptivity to ask. You're wrong. It seems like just as I think we saw, a lot of us are actively trying to.
Oh, absolutely. But those are bad guys and they come to a bad end, all of them.
I think that seems like the opposite. Each one is completely.
That's right. That's right. Daft from weakness.
Melville thinks you should be able to be receptive, but you should also be able to be, enforce your mood on the world too. It seems like
Well, I don't know. I mean, he certainly says you can be receptive and you can force yourself onto the world, but I don't think they're equal. I think the receptive people, of course, if you go completely receptive, you're right. Then Pip has lost his mind, but he's going to join the angels in the end. I mean, it's clear that he's on the right side. I think there are two sides. I mean, for better or for worse. There's the receptive and there's the power people. And from Homer, where the suitors were the power people and they were all in the wrong. And then there's Kant in the middle of it and Descartes, who thinks the main thing is to be autonomous. And of course, Dante thinks that being autonomous is exactly what the sinners all have. And that's the wall that they try to keep God and they keep receptivity out. So there's always a possibility of receptivity, and I don't know how one makes the argument. I have no idea that the receptive people are on the right track and the willful, strong people are on the wrong track.
I think it seems like you're supposed to be both receptive and willful. Like, for instance, Ishmael is receptive to all these different things, but when he's in a specific mood, like when he goes off on those tangents about like the science of the whales, and he seems to pursue almost with the same fervor that Ahab does. This one aspect of the whale, and so it seems like in each of these different moods, he's capable of changing moods, but when he's in it, he's just as willful as Ahab.
I don't know how we settle this. What I would say, he's drawn into it, and he's just as strongly drawn into it as Ahab is controlling it. But now we have to sort of try to decide between us of why I think that the drawing story is what Homer's really sensitive to, and you think not. Yeah.
In that case, no longer receptive. For some reason, he's not receptive to the indigenous people's theory of why this place is sacred and a god. Now all of a sudden, he's completely become. He's focused instead upon measuring the way and trying to find some scientific way of explaining it, as opposed to what they are. So it seems like he lost once he gets into a certain receptive.
It's funny. I would say yes, but that's supposed to be an example of how we've been corrupted by the Descartes scientific worldview, that he would try to do that. So when he's in his better state, he's trying to compose. There he's trying to write the dimensions on his body. In other cases, sometimes he's trying to write a poem on his body. And I think that's what he should be doing. And the scientific thing is what he can't help doing. Or, well, I don't even know if that's right. He can do it, but it will not get him anywhere. Okay, the cytology chapter, which you all were subjected to, I didn't want to tell you not to read it, because after all, if this is the great American novel, you shouldn't be sort of skipping it. But it is true that the whole point of the cytology chapter is it doesn't add up to anything. Nothing is complete, and in the end, they can't even tell whether the whale is an animal or a fish. But you have to read it to find that, to hear Melville saying that. Somebody over here is saying something, no? Okay, let's get past the first sentence of my outline. I don't know, they're all going to seem maybe funny. I'm just going to read them because maybe we've covered them already. There are many colors, perspectives, voices, etc. Each color is incompatible with the others. You can never see more than one color, one perspective at a time. You can only see a rainbow if you give up the idea that all the colors are true at once. Then you get whiteness, dumb blankness. No perspective is the right one underlined. They're all, I'm not sure whether they're all equally okay, but for this discussion, I've been assuming it. And so that's Melville's view. Now comes, I was going to talk about really hard, interesting philosophical things for a little while. If you don't understand anything I say for the next 15 minutes, don't feel bad about it. Take Heidegger course later. But there is a structure here, which is so interesting to me because Melville's got these ideas which didn't get written up by a philosopher until Heidegger in the 30s in 40s mostly was writing this way. But let's try. I like to think I can explain these weird things so that people who are not professional philosophers can understand it. So let me give it a try. So, for one thing, the color that we are seeing something from goes into the background, goes into the illumination, and we don't see it. We see in terms of it, or it withdraws, to talk Heidegger like, and it's on the basis of it. And we're back in that. In this room, this light has a color. I mean, if you looked at it from outside on a snowy day, it would look yellow in here and bluish out there. But if you walked out into the snowy, the bluish would disappear and everything would just look normal. And if you come in here, the yellowness disappears and everything looks normal. It's just, and I don't know if Melville is talking about that when he talks about whiteness or not. I don't have a worked out view about this. Sean Kelly and I differ, and that's scary because we almost always don't. I wouldn't have thought that this way that whatever color you're absorbed in or whatever sound you're absorbed in goes into the background. I wouldn't be sure that it does. If you're listening to some voice, you don't, in the temple, whale temple thing, I'm not sure it goes into the background. And then Sean thinks that, that's what Melville means by whiteness. That whiteness is that the color becomes invisible when it's the color of the whole illumination. And I don't think that's what whiteness in the dumb blankness full of meaning is. Sean is going to be listening to this, so I'm sort of putting it down, written it for him to respond to. But now there's something more interesting and important going on anyway than this question of whiteness, and that's this business about weaving. This is a weaver god, and we've talked about that every once in a while. And Heidegger, interestingly enough, thinks that weaving is sort of the basic way to talk about reality, and that the Homeric Greeks understood that and had words for it. So what's the next question is, sort of, not only is the color in the room gone into the background, but something much more deep and interesting and important is always here, so to speak, and in the background. And that's your understanding of being, the style of the whole way you understand the world. Like that there are a lot of minds around with lots going on inside of them, or there's a lot of stuff in the world all trying to grab your attention, and so forth. Those are very different styles. You get them from being raised in different cultures. And these different styles are what presumably the weaver god is weaving. In different cultures, in each different culture, there is a background understanding, a style. Like now in our technological culture, without thinking about it, because it's sort of built into us, but that's always in there in our bodies, and we were raised that way, we tend to think that we ought to be able to control everything. We ought to be able to, and this is an important thing, sort of de-skill everything so that the GPS can tell us how to get around, and we don't need to know how to navigate anymore. We just have to turn right when it tells us and turn left when it tells us. Microwaves will enable us to cook meals. We don't have to really know how to be a cook anymore. So there's something taking over our whole culture. It's in the background, Heidegger calls it the technological understanding of being. Melville certainly worries about it. He calls it science, and he sees it everywhere, and in funny ways. When he talks about this frigate Earth, I've mentioned that. He may be the first person to think that we now understand the Earth as a something floating around in space. And moreover, I didn't say this clearly last time, if it's a frigate Earth, it means that it's like a spaceship. The Earth is like a spaceship. It's something out in space that we control, or we, in principle, could control. Everything is is something that we can get more and more control of. So anyway, so Melville has this sense that there are these various styles of the culture, and we're in a very dangerous style because science is taking over, and it's invisible. It's in the background all the time, controlling what we pay attention to, what we try to bring about in our behavior and in our lives, and so forth. And that's, and the Weaver God is the one who organizes everything in these various ways. Now that's important because that it's a step beyond Moby Dick, in something that Melville, it's not a step beyond Moby Dick. It's something Melville senses, but I'll scratch what I'm saying that way. I'll say it another way. It's interesting that at the time of Homer, Zeus was the leader. And he was presumably the one who, would take the place of the Weaver God, except he doesn't, because, it's hard to explain. The Weaver God that Melville understands or senses gives us different styles in different cultures. Lots of different styles and different cultures. Melville realizes that, I think, or if he doesn't, we do now. That whatever, something that gives organization and meaning to our culture and our lives is going on, and it's the practices. Remember, I talked about the practices. It's the way people behave and the way people talk and what they look at and what they care about. All of that is what is in the background, and now. So Melville's got something more fundamental than Zeus. That is, because Zeus is not the Weaver God. Zeus is the father of the pantheon, which is the Greek gods, and they have a style. And there's no doubt that the Weaver God wove that style too, and Zeus is part of that style. So there are two levels that Melville thinks about, I think, in this deep philosophical way. That behind everything that's happening, there's our particular style, whether it be everything welling up with wonder and us with gratitude, which is the Homer style, or everything being brought out at its best, which is the Aeschylus style, or everything being made so that we don't have to have any skills anymore, which is the scientific or technological, would be better, the technological style. All of those different styles are possible, and Zeus isn't producing them. Well, what is producing them? In Homer, you get as far as Zeus. There's one style, and there's one family of gods, and Zeus is the one who controls it. But if you believe in Melville, there's something behind that, the Weaver God. And the Weaver God is the various ways the practices work to gather different styles. And that's what you get every once in a while when you get to the very bottom of things, like the bottom of the ocean. You see what Pip sees, the Weaver God. He sees God's foot up on the treadle and so forth. So Melville's got a meta view, namely that behind our ordinary experience, there's already something in the background, and that's Zeus. And then behind all the styles, all the cultures, there is something in the background And that's the fact that the practices gather in some specific way to produce some specific style. Okay, and I'm going to just, so let's see. Yeah, we got time. So in for Homer, there's a family resemblance. All the gods, all the moods have a similar style. And Zeus protects those who go from world to world, but they're all worlds with a similar style. So there's something more extreme than that, and that is that I'm trying to think where I'm going to find it. I'm trying to explain. Page 281. Okay, here we are. I wanted to come back to this, and here it is, where he's talking on 281 about the sperm whale taking the place of Zeus. I think that means that it's when the sperm whale is even behind the one style that Zeus is the organizer of. The sperm whale is the organizer of all the possible styles. And this is why he says this weird thing. First, he's saying on the middle of 281 that the sperm whale has no face, no feature, no nose, eyes, ears, and so forth. That is, the weaver god, which is, I think, the same as the sperm whale, is indeterminate. It can weave all the different cultures. And now maybe that explains this at the bottom of 281. And I've read this before often, because this is Melville relating himself to Homer, only he doesn't know about the Greek, so he does it all in Roman. But I'm going to put it back into Greek, so to speak. If hereafter any highly cultured poetical nation shall lure back to their birthright the Homeric gods, the pantheon of Homeric gods, is what he wants to say, and enthrone them in the now egotistical sky, in the now unhaunted hill, to be sure exalted to Jove's high seat, the great sperm whale shall lord it. I think that means that even higher than Zeus, the sperm whale, which stands for the indeterminacy and the ultimate weaving of things, that is going to oversee all the cultures with all the styles of the cultures. If you don't understand that, don't worry. I'm not sure I do either. But here, I wanted to do one other thing, because I wanted you to really understand, see if you understand what I'm about to ask you about. Enough for that. I have a feeling that I haven't been as clear about that as I should be, so cancel if you haven't understood what I was just talking about, it's probably my fault. But now, I'm going to give you a quote from Nietzsche, and I'm going to ask you what's wrong with this. This is on page 191 of The Gay Science. It's called The Greatest Advantage of Polytheism. So here we're going to get to hear Nietzsche on polytheism. And I'm going to ask you, after you've heard it, do you think that Nietzsche's got it right about polytheism? He says, for an individual to posit, notice that, his own ideal, and to derive from it his own laws and joys and rights, that may have been hitherto considered an outrageous human aberration. But the wonderful art and craft of creating gods, polytheism, was the medium through which this impulse to see things in new ways could discharge and ennoble itself. And now I'm skipping something. The invention of gods was the inestimable preliminary exercise for the justification of egoism and the sovereignty of the individual. Monotheism, on the other hand, is the consequence of believing in one normal type and so forth. But now comes the punchline. In polytheism, the free-spiriting and many-spiriting of man attained its first preliminary form. Man alone among all the animals has no horizons and, well, never mind, that's enough. The preliminary form. So here he is telling us how great polytheism is. And what's he got wrong? Utterly 180 degrees wrong. this is a kind of test to see if you want. I mean, if you haven't understood it, don't be surprised. But if you have, you should be able to see what's wrong. Go ahead.
That weird creating gods, not that they exist, and then we like realize them.
That's right. The idea that the gods, remember, ought to be that which has authority over us, which we don't create, but which draw us to do things and overseas battles and loves, erotic adventures and all that. The gods lead people like Helen and Achilles, but Helen doesn't give to Aphrodite the job of being the goddess of erotic attraction. She is the goddess of erotic attraction, that is Aphrodite, and Helen, it comes under her light. Then Helen is out of control as far as Helen is concerned. And the idea that the thing about polytheism is that we are imposing all this order is just to miss the whole point of polytheism. It's to see the whole thing in this willful light. And now the question you should have in the back of your minds anyway, and what's wrong with this Nietzschean picture? Melville thinks it's wrong. How do we know Melville thinks it's wrong? Because he in effect pushes Balkington off the boat. And Balkington was the one who was standing in the infinite and ready to give everything, presumably its meaning. Maybe. Anyway, but one thing is sure, that you can't save meaning and the sacred and what makes life worth living if you think that you can give things the meaning and authority over you and over everybody, because then they wouldn't have any authority anymore. If you could give them meaning, you could just take it back again. It's got to be, the polytheist has got to believe that there are these forces out of their control that organize what's significant in their lives. So I just wanted to warn you against what happens, what Nietzsche does to this. And it's nice that Nietzsche does it, because that's just exactly what you'd expect to happen. That the more you get believing in willpower, in autonomy, and so forth, the more you're going to see the gods as something that, since you give meaning to everything, you're going to see the gods too as something you gave meaning to. But then there's no place for the sacred. There's no place for a kind of power that pulls you into things. So let's go back to Helen for a minute. Because what's interesting in the in the Homer story is that people let themselves be, in the Homer time, let themselves be pulled into these ways of acting. The way Helen lets herself be pulled into this, swept away by Paris. And what happens next is so important. That people get so confused. They say, but Helen regretted it, that she ran off like that. That's very important. Yes, she regretted it. And it's part of what people admire about her, that she not only let herself be carried away, but she was ready to see that it went wrong and to take responsibility for it and go back to Menelaus. So what do you see there? It's not that, she's being willful. She's letting herself be pulled in by a different goddess, presumably Hera, the domestic goddess, although we don't hear much about her. What I want to say, what's important is that in this Homeric way of life, that you want to be open to what's drawing you in, and you want to take the risk of letting it draw you in. And if it goes wrong, you learn from your mistakes, and you don't get drawn into that again. That leads me to, with just 5 minutes, I wanted to say something that I thought was like a summary. Which is pretty brief and simple-minded, but so you have something to take home. So, how should we live now that the Homer gods are gone, the Aeschylus gods are gone, Augustus and Virgil and those gods are gone. And I had, now I could do it without what I wrote, but I did write it down. Okay, here we are. So here's a minimal way of having a meaningful life in what is becoming a more and more nihilistic culture based on this course. So you have to give up the belief in one independent basic reality. That is, that you want to, this is Melville, I'm claiming. And Melville wants you to doubt that you can find the final reality in terms of revelation or reason or science or romanticism. We haven't talked about that, or pantheism, or unconditional commitments. That's Mapple's way of looking at things. And you want to get rid of will and autonomy, because what we posit as mattering can't really matter to us. And you've got to be willing to accept the risks that go with letting yourself be drawn into whatever calls you. You've got to be grateful for these moods that are as gods that grab you and have authority in your life, and be ready to follow them, and be ready to let them go and regret if you suffered from the way you followed them. Then, and what will you get if you do all that? Well, you won't get bliss, and you won't get Homeric or whatever they have. I don't know the word for their kind of positive experience. You won't get bliss, which is Dante's positive experience. You won't get rejoicing, which is Luther's private experience. You've got to cut down your demands, Melville thinks. You'll get what he calls contentment. So but if you follow this sort of list of things that I've said that Melville thinks you should do, then and if you are open to the return of the gods, which is if you are able even to help lure back the gods, if you develop skills that are open to these moods and help you and let yourself be pulled into them, then you can have a life which has a kind of relative meaningfulness and what Melville calls contentment. That's what he feels when he does the squeezing of the sperm. That's what he feels when he writes to Hawthorne how he feels having finished this book. It's scaling down your demands, but it offers you a life that is still pretty intense, pretty meaningful, pretty exciting, and risky too. Okay, now I've said the one sort of summary thing that I wanted to say. That's it. Okay, you can go. Don't just sit there.